A one and a two and a chick-a-boom a chick.
So if you listen to this recording and you go, man, that Vicky had some things to say that I need to hear more about, and you are listening to this and it is still the tail end of February or the first week in March 2020, go to Suiter, Suiter, suiterbusinessbuilders.com/remodel. Suiterbusinessbuilders with an S.com/remodel. And Vicky has a webinar that she's doing on March 3rd, on March 5th, and March 6th that is all about getting your team to take ownership. She is very good at what she does. The webinar is packed with good information, some templates, some tools that will actually allow you to take the information you're learning and implement. So again, if you're enjoy the recording today, go to suiterbusinessbuilders.com/remodel, sign up for that webinar, and enjoy this recording of I think third-time guest, if I remember our recording correctly, on the Remodelers on the Rise podcast. Be sure that you subscribe to Remodelers on the Rise, maybe even leave a review, and more than anything else, learn and enjoy this recording. Thanks a lot. Welcome, everyone, to Remodelers on the Rise. I have not gone back to look, but I do believe, Vicky Suiter, that you are the most frequent guest on the Remodelers on the Rise podcast.
Woohoo!
Congratulations. I do have Vicky Suiter again.
I feel honored, Kyle.
as you should. So I want to talk about two things. One first being, I want to tell you about a mastermind group that Vicky and I are both a part of. It's called the Construction Consultants Mastermind. We call it CCM. We are just fresh back. Today's Tuesday. Last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 of us, including the two best people in the group, Vicky and I. Sorry to all of you other ones who are listening to this, but it's true. I mean, you can't.
We're going to make points on that one.
just stating facts. But we had a retreat. Every month we get together for a 90-minute video conference call, and then every year we get together for a 3-day conference. And I don't know about you, Vicky, but I came, you just never know what you're going to get from like a retreat, a mastermind group where everybody's there to help each other, to give each other advice. Everybody gets a little bit of a hot seat time to talk about their business. And every time we do it, I'm just coming back fired up, crystal clear on my business. It was funny because my wife was struggling to find me a birthday present. And she's like, I can't shop for you. And it was the day I was coming back from the conference. And I said, honey, I just went away for 3 days and like talked about my business, coming back on fire, clear, no direction. Like, that's a perfect birthday present. You don't have to get me anything else. She was like, phew, that's great. So I share that because remodelers who are listening to this, whether you create your own, whether you find a local mentor, somebody that you really admire that's 20 years ahead of you, and you ask to buy them breakfast or lunch or dinner, whether you join something like Remodelers Advantage or a Remodeler 20 Club, or you get involved in mastermind groups I have, getting surrounded by your peers is such an energizing thing. We are in our businesses. We are in our own heads. We are, and frankly, when you get other perspectives, it just sharpens you and helps so much. What would you add to that, Vicky?
So there's two things I would add to it because I would concur with everything that you just said. One of the things that's really, I have found hugely valuable is the fact that it's a group of people who care about me and my success and are willing to be completely honest about what they see and give me, as you say, like feedback about stuff and things that I'm challenged with, or like questions that I have that give me a completely different perspective. But also it's like that group of people kind of like who have your back and who are really committed to wanting to lean in and really support you. And we don't have that as small business owners or, even large business owners. Like a lot of times there's just not that other person or those other people who give us that feedback and help us see what we're blind to. No matter how hard of a worker you are or how rigorous you are or how many books you read or, courses you take, it's very different when you have somebody who is leaning into what are you about and and helping you identify where your blind spots are. And
and it doesn't happen overnight. Like any
No.
good community, it takes time. And even last year there was just a really good feel, but just being a whole nother year together, and there's just more like, I care about how you guys are doing. And when you get in a group where, yes, you're there for your own selfish reasons, but the focal point and the real reason is to like to help each other, man, it just, good things come from that.
Yeah. What a depth
now you said,
as you do it the longer.
Yeah. Now you said it didn't matter if you read books or courses and stuff, but
well, it does. But it's all I'm saying is that it's different. It's
Vicky,
not. It's
Vicky. I was trying to pitch your course coming up. I was making a perfect little segue of saying, now, even though you said it doesn't matter what book you read, whether it's The Profit Bleed by Vicky Suter or the upcoming course that she's putting on called Build Your Dream Team that starts on what date? March what?
March 12th.
12th. You know, those things are still good. You should sign up for her course, but you should also surround yourself with good people. Just let me do my thing over here. Don't interrupt my beautiful flow into selling your course.
Such a nice segue too.
Because it is a good course. But today, all we're going to do is just give the people, you listening, value. And what's kind of funny is we were coming up with the title. There's a series of questions. There's definitely a topic that I want to dig into here. And we were kind of like, hey, what would be a fresh title for this? So Vicky started brainstorming it. Here's some of the things she came up with. Ever feel like you're herding cats? Ever feel like you're pushing wet ropes uphill? Ever feel like you're a micromanager? Does managing people cause you stress? And she was like trying to figure out the best one to come up with. I'm like, those are great, because that description, those 4 things, that's what we're talking about. Managing your team, managing your remodeling team is hard. Managing people is hard. It does feel like herding cats some days. It does feel like you're micromanaging, but Kyle, I've got to micromanage or else it doesn't get done. You know, does it cause you stress? Absolutely. You know that you need to continue to improve the way you manage, improve being a better manager, but it's hard. And I want to just kind of lean into that and talk about that and tap into Vicky's knowledge and expertise on this topic today. So I want to start by not asking one of those 4 questions, but actually I do. Why like the summary of those 4 things? Why does that come? Why is that the case for most people? Why does it feel like that? Why does it feel like I'm micromanaging? Why is it hard? What would you say?
I think that there's a couple reasons why that happens. One is that we get in, like when we first start as entrepreneurs, that we have complete control over what we do and how we do it and what the end product is. And then as you start to add people, so many of us didn't learn or didn't get trained or didn't go to school to learn how to manage people. And so we want to hold on to control, at the same time want people to help us. And what happens is that we end up having people who help us, but from this very constricted place of we have to still maintain control. And what eventually happens is you add enough people and you just get tired because there's not enough hours in a day or bandwidth to be able to be in control of everything and still have a larger volume of work occur. So that's one really key reason. And I think the other thing just speaks to what I was just saying is, like, we didn't get trained how to manage and lead people. And oftentimes our model is however we were managed or led as, when we were earlier in our career. And for a lot of people, it was like, you learned on the job. I know that for me, I learned from people who were not necessarily really great leaders. And I think that there's a lot of people in the remodeling industry who learned based on being on a job site when they were younger. And then they went right into construction and sometimes running in their own business, working for someone who wasn't really well trained at managing people either. So I don't think we have good role models, I guess is what I'm saying.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, here's another question to kind of dig further into the topic. How do you manage great teams? Like how do you do that? What's the key to building teams that produce consistent results?
There's a couple of things. One is
by the way, I don't know if you guys are watching the video part. We videotape it. Hosting a podcast is so easy. Like I asked a question. I went over, I grabbed my water. I'm just going to sip water and listen to you. Like, being a host is so easy. You know,
because you just ask the questions and then
just
somebody
ask the
else
question, then I sip some
come up with-
water, I listen to smart things, and I kind of ask a little quality. It's just, what a role. Anyways, what's the key to building teams that produce consistent results?
There's a couple of things. So the key to building teams that produce consistent results is that we need to let people know what those results are. So often we hire somebody and we give them tasks to do. And we tell them, you're in charge of making sure the job stays on schedule, or you're in charge of making sure that the costs come in on budget. But we don't actually give them so how often do you have to update the schedule? Or what's the tool that you need to be using to update that schedule? Or when are you going to be doing cost to complete or reviewing the job hour burn report? And we don't give them a structure and the tools for what's the result we want them to manage. We just kind of speak to the tasks of what they have to do. And what I've seen is that, and this was true for me when I shifted my leadership style many years ago when I started to learn about this whole thing, but I've watched this with clients too, that when you start to make that shift in your mindset to shifting from people being helpers and just having tasks that they help you do or that they're responsible for, to holding people accountable for specific results and defining what those results are for them, right? So it's like you could look at it and go, well, you're a project manager. Your job is on time, on budget as promised. But the more you can codify that into specifics and what does it look like, and create feedback systems within your organization to help people be able to self-manage to a specific, measurable, clearly defined goals and results, the easier it is for them to self-manage what they do, and the easier it is for you as a leader to know how to and when to be doing that kind of check-in and communicate. Your communication becomes about the result as opposed to, well, hey, how's it going? Mm-hmm. Or what's, or a focus just on all of what's not working.
Yeah. I mean, just even asking yourself, if you're managing people, are they just helpers for me? Am I just giving them tasks, or have I really empowered them to understand what the results they need to deliver are? I mean, even just pondering that and thinking about that when it comes to your key people on your team, if it's tasks and if it's helper and it's not results and you can't measure it, then that's probably the key linchpin as to why it feels like you're micromanaging. It feels like you're herding cats.
Yeah.
Interesting.
One really simple distinction, and this plays off of what you just said, Kyle, is that if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. So if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. So if you want them to manage to a result, they need to be able to self-manage and monitor what that result is, which is why instead of schedules are getting updated. Schedules are updated in project, in Microsoft Project every week by 12 noon on Thursday. Now that's specific, it's measurable, there's clear accountability, right? So even just starting to put those qualifiers around it, now they're managing their time differently because they know they have a meeting with you at 3:00 to go over that schedule. Right. So it just starts to shift how we engage with people. And that's really the key.
If we rewind, if you guys just click rewind on your little podcast app, and the iPhone is just 30 seconds. 30 seconds. If you go back, you're going to hear, if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. And then you heard an example, the schedule updated weekly by noon on Thursday. If I have somebody, now when that comes and it's 12:05, you might not throw a fit. But you start to set that expectation. Well, it didn't work, Kyle. I did that. Okay. All right. Let's try that again. Keep consistent with it. Say, yes. Hey, we didn't get this. Well, I thought I didn't realize you. No, this is the next thing. Like, that's when I expect it. And then we're going to meet and review it. A lot of this is blocking and tackling. And again, so much of it is, if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. Set clear parameters and set clear SMART goals.
Yeah. Yeah. And
as much as I like to think it's super, super complicated, it's also pretty practical.
Yeah.
Managing people.
And one of the things is just be consistent in that you've set up a structure to be able to consistently be in conversation and engaging with your team. So if I've got a project manager or 2 or 3, I have regular meetings scheduled with them, whether that's every week or every other week or twice a week, whatever it is, depending on your company, it's going to vary, right? But just as you say, Kyle, be super consistent about it, because when you start to implement change in your business, people are going to test you to find out if you're serious about the change that you want to occur. Like, right, we can all relate to that. Like, you put change in place and it's all good for like a week or 2, but then it sort of falls apart.
There he goes, listening to another Remodelers on the Rise podcast, and he's all fired up, but he'll implement it for a day, and then next week he'll forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to be consistent, and which is why I recommend, don't make it, when you're first doing this, don't try to do 50 things or 10 things all at one time. If you go, the most important meetings and the most important place that I need to manage better is with my project manager or my foreman or my office manager or my bookkeeper, whoever that is, and then figure out what are the key deliverables of that position. And I'm happy to share with everybody who's listening my 6 steps to writing a great position agreement, because that's where you want to define and is in people's position agreements. And it kind of walks you through step by step how to sort of develop that. But when you've identified what those deliverables are, choose the top 3 most important ones, and then set a schedule for meeting with those people on just a regular basis, and make it so that there's no excuses, right? There's no, I had to go on a sales call, or the inspector was showing up, or the subcontractor wanted to meet on the job site. No, it's a non-negotiable meeting. And if you start to develop that discipline for yourself as a manager and an owner, you're going to find that your team they're going to start to mimic your behavior and start to create that discipline as well. And, it's interesting because because I know that, as business owners, a lot of times we don't want to have that restriction on us. We want to be able to have the freedom and choice. But what's interesting is when you do those meetings consistently and rigorously and make them a non-negotiable, what you're going to find is that your team starts to own more of the result, and it will require less of your time in the long run to be able to manage and run your department or your business. And I've seen this over and over again. So, part of this is just be willing to go through the eye of the needle of creating that discipline. And when you do, you're going to find that ultimately you have a lot more freedom.
And even the question I asked there of what's the key to building teams that produce consistent results? That's what you were just describing. I when you look at a company, look at a remodeler who's got maybe 20, 25 employees, and you look across the fruited plains in Canada, the Great White North, if you're listening from up there, but you look at all of those businesses that have 20, 30 employees, they have measurements. If it can't be measured, it can't be managed. There's no way there's a successful remodeler out there with 30 employees that doesn't have this, that isn't taking these meetings seriously, that doesn't have clear goals and deadlines and consistency in there. I think the real interesting thing is the majority of you listening are 2, 3, 4, 6, person operations. And it's just as important to get these things in place if you're a smaller remodeler, because it is even more so for you, it's what's going to give you that next step into some freedom of time and focus. So
yeah. Excellent. And I appreciate what you said, because this is the practice this is what great companies do. This is what successful businesses do. They have that discipline built in so that it's not, it's not a flavor of the week. They're not reactionary. They're proactive. And this is a way to start to be more intentional and proactive about, what's the business that I'm building, right? Yeah. If you want to have it create a more consistent result, create an environment that speaks to more consistency and more discipline in that way.
There you go. So we're halfway through already, and I feel like we're delivering value. We are reminding, maybe even inspiring people to get involved in some mentoring and some mastermind meetings, which is just can be such a huge eye opener and help. And then I've been on this kick lately where I am trying to repeat the same thing over and over again. So the big other thing we covered is if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. If it can't be measured, it can't be managed. And I want that to be drilled in because I'm hoping that 2 of you listening to this, write that down and actually realize, oh, wait a minute, that's related to defining the results I'm looking for out of my team. Cool. So this next big section is another question, which is what are 3, I could say 3 things. You could go with 2, you could go with 4, but let's say 3 because it is my favorite number. Do you know why it's my favorite number, by the way?
Why is it your favorite number, Kyle?
Because, well, thank you for asking. I'm going to share 2 quirky things about me. Number 1, when I am using a microwave, and let's say I put it in for 60 seconds, or often, here's what it is I have a cup of coffee, get busy with the kids, and then the cup gets cold. I usually go over and set the timer for 30 seconds or 40 seconds. And often, if I'm standing there, I will open the microwave at the 3-second mark. That's a quirky thing. It's just weird, right?
Yeah, it's a little.
When I was in Orlando with you, I heated up my coffee multiple times, and I did that exact thing. But number 3 is my favorite number because of the Hall of Fame baseball player as of a year ago, Alan Trammell. Alan Trammell was my favorite baseball player growing up. I was number 3 always, and I was a huge baseball card collector. You know what's really interesting right now? I just looked up at the clock, and it's 3:33. It's just 3s. But Alan Trammell was my favorite player. He was just an awesome dude, and the way I started in business was actually buying and selling baseball cards online. I was a huge baseball card collector and a huge Alan Trammell collector, and that's how I started my business. So that's why my favorite number is 3. Now, was that too much?
No, I thought it was great.
Because, like I said earlier, it's fun. It's also, not only is it easy being a host, it's kind of fun. But anyways, the reason I said that.
With Kyle Hunt.
What'd you say? Especially
when you're with Kyle Hunt.
Okay, fair enough. But 3 is the number we were looking for there. Now we've really got to lean into 3. What are the 3 things a remodeler can do to increase profits? Just flat out talking about increasing profits. What comes to your mind related to that?
The first thing that comes to mind is being really clear that you are actually pricing for profits. So that means that you're really clear. I mean, there's kind of the obvious things like you're really clear about scope and you've done a good job on scope. And then there's the next obvious thing of I'm really clear on what the cost is of doing that work. I really know what it costs me to have that employee. And, you know, everybody's paying 20% more in this last year for their employees, whether that's hourly wage, benefits, 401k, all that stuff.
Say that again.
It's 20% more for every employee.
Because everything's increasing.
Everything is, yeah. And materials have gone up 20% with all of the things that are going out in the world with tariffs and so on and so forth. So our costs have all gone up. So I'm just going to say that's a given, is making sure that you have a clear number and know what your real cost is for your employees with burden and benefits and all that kind of stuff. But the next most important thing, and this is the thing that I see people miss all the time, is making sure that you are pricing for profit in that you're marking up enough to cover your overhead and that you're marking up enough to make your desired profit margin. So knowing your overhead break-even percentage, if you take your overhead cost divided by your cost of goods sold for for last year, and you come up with that percentage, that's how much you have to mark up your cost in order to just make nothing on the bottom line. And then, so once you know that number, making sure that you then mark up to make a profit. And profit is not an afterthought. That's the place where you begin to make and lose money is when you're doing bidding and you're figuring out what the price is that you're going to charge, is making sure that you're marking up enough to make at least 8 to 10% net profit, and ideally 10 to 12%. And that's a standard of a well-run construction.
And that's after the owner has paid themselves a reasonable salary, right?
Yes, that is after owner's reasonable salary. And so if you're a sole proprietor listening, that needs to be significantly higher. So, it's interesting. 3 things a contractor, remodeler can do to increase profits, and we're starting with
just before any work is even done. Right. It's similar to, people talk about, making a profit off of like flipping a house, like you make it on the purchase. Like that's where you really make it. Similarly, like if you want to increase profits, you got to be very clear and be pricing for profit. I think one key takeaway there, as you mentioned, everything employee burden wise, cost wise is going up, workers' comp, insurance, et cetera. When was the last time that you took some time to pull up a spreadsheet, put in your folks' hourly wage, and then really work through all of those burdens to make sure that you have that full burden in there before you add your markup? If you haven't done that in a year, stop listening to this right now, pause it, and go do that. That's a very, very important thing.
Yes.
And also they should just charge stinking more, shouldn't they? Because doggone it, they provide a wonderful service.
Yeah, I have to tell you that in nearly 30 years of working with contractors and looking at what their pricing is, I have never told somebody that they need to reduce their prices. And what I find more often than not is people are undercharging for their services because they, quote unquote, think that that's what the market will bear, or that's what they have to charge to be competitive. And the thing that's cool about numbers is that when you know your numbers, then you're making decisions about pricing with your eyes wide open. And there's only two ways to affect the bottom line: either increase revenue or decrease costs. There's only two ways to do that: either sell more or increase your markups, or add services, which is sell more. And the only two ways to reduce cost is spend less in overhead, literally, or become more efficient in production, which leads me to the next one. So the second way that you can increase your profits is part of what I was talking about earlier, is to have clearly defined position agreements within your company that speaks to the results you want somebody to produce and that clearly outlines their accountability. And so on the production side, if I have a foreman, that would include things like making sure that the foreman's doing 2-week look-aheads and planning out the project in advance so that you're not reacting to it. Or if it's a project manager, that they're doing schedules and keeping those updated every week. But the idea behind it is that when position agreements are done well, they have people not just thinking about what's in front of me now, but they have them lifting up their head and thinking about what's coming up in front of me, what's in the future that I have to consider or I have to be paying attention to and managing to. So it's the opportunity for you to set up your team to be thinking proactively versus just reactively. So the more you clearly define that and have those key deliverables defined in each position within your business, and it's not by person, by the way, it's by position. So foremen do 2-week look-aheads. Project managers do schedules every week. Foremen do 2-week look-aheads every week. Your accounting department makes sure that all of the books are completely up to date by the end of the day every Friday, right? So that you have good feedback. Like things like that are the things that produce a more consistent result and allow you to be more efficient, which then allow you to capture gross profit dollars and net profit dollars.
All of those examples you just mentioned, I could manage because I can measure them. I'm going back to that, right? Literally, I could. Like, time out. You're supposed to have this done by Friday. The other thing, I wish if this was a webinar, I would say everybody in their chat box, answer this question. I think it's just interesting the way you describe some of those, of like realizing how many hours and dollars does it save us when we are looking ahead and planning ahead. Like really think about that. It's interesting where, okay, I spend an hour just planning and working on a schedule. Like it seems like I'm just wasting time. I could be producing stuff. No, you're saving hours and hours and hours. Like 5 hours, 6 hours for every hour of good, solid planning and pre-construction conference and upcoming schedule. Man, it solves headaches. It improves client satisfaction. It reduces our scheduling time, completion date, all of that. Okay, so that's number 2. And then why is number 3 my favorite number again? Who's the baseball player?
Oh, you're stretching my mind now. I'm not a sports person. I have no idea what his name was. Sorry, Kyle.
It's okay. He's a Hall of Famer. He's from California originally, by the way. So you should definitely. His name was Alan Trammell.
Alan Trammell, of course.
Alan Trammell, 2 M's, 2 L's in his last name, just in case you're wondering.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm getting ready after you do your third thing to really pitch your course that's coming up like hard, even though I don't usually do that. But I was really going to say, if she listened to me and she remembers my favorite baseball player's name, I'm going to really pitch it. If she doesn't, I'm going to be like, go to buildyourdreamteam.com. Thanks. Anyways, what's number 3?
Number 3 is to create a structure whereby you are consistently managing for results in your team. So within every department, every part of your team, that you've set up a structure and consistent systems and structures for doing that. So let me give you an example. I'll use the 2-week look ahead example, that there's a process for that, or that there is a process for change orders, or there's a process for doing scheduling, or there's a process for how estimates are done and checked and verified. That the more you have consistent processes that are your way of doing that within your company, you're going to produce a more consistent result. Then you're going to be able to create a more consistent profit. So So having systems and structures in place that allow your team to be able to produce a more consistent result is key. And the other flip side of that is making sure that you have a structure whereby you're checking in with your team on a regular basis. That goes back to what we were talking about before, that you have that discipline of meeting with them, with each department on a regular basis, to be doing that check-in and being consistent about it.
Love it. Love it. That was good stuff. And I was kind of trying to keep it to about 30 minutes, and we're like 28 minutes in. So it's excellent. I'm really keeping it to 30 minutes because in 2 minutes, I got to get to start going to my son's basketball game. The mighty Whitmore Lake Trojans 8th grade basketball team, I think they're 0-8 on the year, in case anybody was wondering.
Nice.
We're playing the mighty.
Congratulations.
Yes. So hopefully, we're really hoping. There's one team that's they almost beat, and it's their last game of the year next week. I'm not really thinking today's going to do very well based on the last one, but so that's why we kind of need to wrap it up, because Dad's got to go watch Sonny Boy play basketball. But especially the first half of this webinar, where we're getting into the importance of managing our team, the position agreements, even some of what we just talked about at the tail end there. Since it's not something we've been trained in very well, since it is tricky and not it is hard, but with the right tools it becomes a lot easier. Vicki does once a year, and yes, because I'm in a mastermind group with her, but also because I just know from several clients who went through her course last year that this is just very helpful and will take you from, crap, I need to do all the stuff they just talked about, to, oh, I've got this implemented, I've got it customized, I've got the templates, I've got the tools, I've got the training, I'm actually doing this. There's a course that you have called Build Your Dream Team that's going to be coming out, depending on when we publish this, a couple weeks out or whenever. But why don't you share with the people, give them just a real, Gary Vee calls it a right hook. Give them a real right hook about what this course is about and why they should buy it from you.
Okay, so the Build Your Dream Team course is all about helping you shift from being a micromanager and having to, as Kyle was saying early on, herd cats, to being able to create a structure whereby your team takes more ownership, where you're able to produce more consistent results, where you are developing the structure, the tools, and the practices to be able to build a team that creates more profits in your business, to be able to build an organization that great people want to come work for, and that you get the support you need and all the tools you need to be able to do that. So I've developed lots of tools in the Build Your Dream Team course. I share a ton of resources and tools for you, and I walk you through it in these 6 sessions that go from March 12th for 6 weeks. It's live 90-minute, and I walk you through the training, and then I give you all of the tools and resources to help you implement everything that you're learning.
Vicki, the people that went through the course last year, I mean, everybody gets excited. Let me sign up for a course. Oh, I'm so excited. How did people do as far as actually implementing it? At the end of the 6 or 7 weeks, did they actually make really good progress and get it implemented?
Yeah, they made huge progress. And I'm still hearing from people this year about how they have implemented position agreements with their team, and they're starting to see that whole culture shift to one where they have people who are more like partners with them than helpers. And that's just like, that's such a relief as a business owner or a manager to feel like your team is more in line with focusing on the big picture and the results versus, waiting for you to make the call, that there's way more proactive engagement among their team.
Yeah, that's great. I want you to tell them where to go here in a second, but one thing you said in that last part, which I think is a really big risk that a lot of remodelers have, and it's just going to keep getting harder and harder to find good people. And we need to be a place where people actually want to come and work for us. We have a reputation and a culture where people actually want to work for us, and good people want to stick around. So when you mentioned, like, these things also are key to building a culture and a business, and where people feel empowered and enjoy working for you. They're not being managed by somebody that this day is thinking this day is thinking that. People like that consistency and that clear path, and how do I continue to improve, and frankly, having responsibility. So I think that's a huge thing that this year, and frankly, next year, following year, 2026, 2028, it's just going to keep getting more and more important to really make sure our business is have good cultures. And this is a key part of that. Cool. So where should people go to if they want to find out more details?
They can go to suitorbusinessbuilders.com. And if you go to, actually, you know what, Kyle, let's make this super easy for people.
Okay.
We're going to give you a link. You can just put it at the bottom of the video, and I will give you a link for the podcast listeners that they can just go click on that link, because it's kind of long. So rather than people trying to write it down, it'll be in your show notes and it'll be on the video, so people can just click on that link and go directly to the course and find out everything that they need to know about the specifics and how to register.
Lovely. Sounds wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure. Again, you're the leader in the clubhouse as far as most Remodelers on the Rise appearances. And I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. It's always fun. And I think the big thing is, why do I do this podcast? Why do we put the effort into this podcast? Is to give value to you guys. Something that you forwarded me an email from a guy named Kurt earlier in the week of like, hey, I listened to you on the podcast. This was from a few months ago. And it just is so awesome to see somebody that heard it, that's starting to implement it, that had some questions about it. You responded back and gave them some feedback. So we're just real people, just so you guys know, like, we're just people. So when you have questions, when you have thoughts, like, reach out to us, let us help you. That's why we do what we do. We both, I can speak for you, we both just love helping and serving. And awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kyle. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep. See you. And one more time, Suiter, SUITER, businessbuilders.com/remodel. Go sign up for that webinar, and hope you enjoyed today's recording. Go out there, kick some butt today, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss Remodeler. Implement what you learned and keep improving day in and day out. I'll keep these recordings and podcasts coming as long as you keep implementing and improving. How's that for a deal? Have a wonderful rest of your day.